Have you ever paused to consider why some women live alone, not in heartbreak, not in longing, but in deliberate solitude? It's not because they lack options. It's not because they've given up on love. It's because they've chosen something else, something deeper, more unsettling to the world we live in. They've chosen themselves. This kind of self-discovery doesn't come with applause, validation, or company. It comes with silence, with strength, with a freedom most people aren't ready to understand. She isn't lonely. She's discerning. She isn't cold. She's simply done setting herself on fire to keep others warm. There's something quietly radical about a woman who no longer seeks a relationship to feel whole, because it challenges everything we've been told, that a woman's worth is found in someone else's gaze, that her story only begins when someone else walks in. But when she chooses herself, she rewrites the narrative. She dismantles the myth of dependency. She steps outside the frame and becomes the mirror. Carl Jung once said, "What we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow." And maybe these women, these unapologetically whole women, are just that. Reflections of the shadow, of the quiet longing in so many to live freely, courageously, without permission. They don't shout their worth. They live it. They don't perform to be seen. They preserve to be whole. They're not searching for a fairy tale. They're protecting their peace. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because while the world rushes to pair up, they've discovered the power of standing still, of being alone without being empty, of being full without being filled. The woman who lives alone isn't incomplete. She's simply living on a different frequency, where nothing is begged for, only chosen, where presence matters more than approval, and where solitude isn't a wound, but a sanctuary. So no, she isn't waiting. She's becoming. She doesn't want a love that shrinks her. She wants a love that meets her at her full height. And until that arrives, she stands, strong, whole, complete. Maybe it's hard to understand. Maybe from the outside, it looks like pride, self-protection, or even emotional damage. But somewhere, deep within you, there's a quiet question that lingers. What if this silent path is the one that leads to the most meaningful kind of love? The kind that begins with yourself. The stillness around a woman who chooses solitude isn't emptiness. It's a sanctuary. And those who haven't learned the value of that space often misread her. They call her cold, distant, guarded. But they don't see the truth. She didn't build walls to keep the world out. She built boundaries so she wouldn't lose herself within it. Carl Jung once wrote that what we refuse to face within ourselves, we project onto others. And maybe that's why so many confuse solitude with absence, when in reality it can be sacred ground, where true self-discovery begins. While most seek to fill their emptiness through others, she turned inward. And there, in the vast quiet of her own psyche, she faced what she had long avoided, the echoes of childhood pain, silent abandonments, and illusions dressed up as love. Her decision to be alone wasn't made in despair. It was born from healing, from a scar, not a wound. She hasn't stopped believing in love. She's just stopped accepting the kind that costs her pieces of herself. This is a woman who knows chaos. She has loved to the point of disappearance. She has begged for what should have been given freely. And at some point, the ache stopped breaking her. It started teaching her. What you see now isn't detachment. It's emotional maturity. And maturity unsettles people. Because it asks for presence, not performance. Depth, not drama. Truth, not illusion. She no longer seeks company for comfort. She seeks reciprocity. She is no longer drawn to promises, but to presence. And maybe that's why she feels unreachable. Not because she wants to be rescued, but because she longs to be seen. And to truly see her, you have to be willing to go deep, to meet her in the silence, to step into your own shadow. Many won't, not because she's too much, but because she's complete. And when a woman becomes whole, she stirs two things in people: admiration and fear. Admiration from those also on the path to wholeness. Fear from those still living in halves, waiting for someone else to make them feel full. She isn't looking to complete anyone. She wants to overflow beside someone who has also come home to themselves. Until then, she remains alone. Not out of bitterness, but out of loyalty to her own soul. She isn't hiding. She's preserving. There's a world of difference. But in a culture that still glorifies completion through romance, her way is disruptive, because she's living proof that joy, peace, and fulfillment can exist without dependency. She hears the familiar voices. You're too picky. You should be more open. Nobody's perfect. And she simply smiles, not with arrogance, but with knowing. Because what others call picky is what she calls the bare minimum. And it took her years to understand. She was worthy of it. She's not seeking perfection. She's seeking resonance. A partner who has done their inner work, who can meet her in the quiet, who can stand in the fire of truth and not flinch. That kind of connection isn't found on every corner. And the discomfort she provokes doesn't lie in her words. It lives in her existence. She is proof that a woman can live, love, and flourish without needing to be completed by someone else. And that quiet defiance, it doesn't yell, but it tears the masks off men who survive by preying on insecurity, off women still entangled in the need for approval. She isn't trying to confront anyone. She's simply being. And that, in itself, becomes a mirror, a brutal, honest mirror that reflects everything others have yet to face. This woman is in no rush. She doesn't force connections or play by urgency. She respects the pace of her own soul. And that stillness stirs something in a world addicted to speed. While society glorifies constant motion, she seeks depth. While others crave attention, she craves presence. She longs for connection that speaks to the soul, not fleeting attraction that fades with the next Instagram scroll. When she says no, it's not strategy, it's truth. When she walks away, it's not drama, it's self-respect. When she stays home instead of entertaining the empty, it's not arrogance, it's clarity. And that clarity, earned not through ease but through pain, through surrender, through loss, is her quiet revolution. Because she's not living to impress, she's living to be. And being, truly being, is dangerous in a world that thrives on pretense. Perhaps what unsettles people the most isn't her solitude, it's her peace. A peace not given, but carved out through the wreckage of old selves. Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken." And that's exactly what she did. Her journey wasn't romantic, it was raw. It was the dismantling of emotional dependencies, the shedding of inherited roles, the rebuilding of identity, brick by conscious brick. She no longer defines herself by how others see her. She sees herself, fully, clearly. And that changes everything. How many times have you asked yourself if being alone means something is missing? How many times have you felt the need to explain yourself for not having someone at your side? She's asked those same questions. There was a time she believed solitude meant failure. In a world that idolizes couples, even unhappy ones, she felt broken for walking alone. Until one day, she realized, it's better to be alone than to be unseen in a relationship. That day, she made a quiet promise to herself. Never again would she shrink to fit. Never again would she settle for less than what her soul deserved. Her path isn't perfect. There are days of doubt, moments of longing, nights filled with silence. But there's also strength, a strength that deepens with every choice made in awareness. She learned that love, real love, doesn't cage, it doesn't possess, it doesn't manipulate or mute the spirit. The love she seeks is the kind that liberates, that amplifies, that supports without suffocating. And until that kind of love arrives, if it ever does, she will continue to grow, not out of pride, but out of integrity. She is the embodiment of Jung's individuation. She descended into the dark, faced her shadow, confronted what was buried, and returned, not perfect, but whole. And now that she knows who she is, she will never again be half of anything. She's not searching for someone to complete her. She's waiting, if she waits at all, for someone who has also completed the inner journey. And yes, that's intimidating, because it requires emotional responsibility. And most people still love from fear, from lack, from the hunger to possess, rather than the desire to share. So if she walks alone today, it's not emptiness, it's wisdom echoing with every step. Every no is an act of self-respect. Every boundary is a reminder. Love should never be begged. She no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. There's a calm certainty in her now, a truth that rose not from applause, but from the silence of her own soul. And that kind of truth changes everything. For a woman who has come home to herself is not dangerous because she is loud, but because she is clear. The woman who walks alone today is not the same one who once begged to be loved. Something in her broke, and that break, paradoxically, was the beginning of her freedom. Because sometimes, only in collapse does the soul find its new form. Carl Jung once wrote, "The tree that reaches to heaven must also have roots that reach down to hell." She knows this intimately. She descended into the depths of her own story, confronted inherited wounds, held the grief of generations in her hands. She faced patterns that echoed through bloodlines, and said no, no more. No to the roles that silenced her, no to the relationships that recycled pain, no to the belief that love must be earned through sacrifice of self. And when she finally stopped accepting less, the world tried to tell her she was too much, too independent, too distant, too complicated. But she stood firm, first with hesitation, then with knowing, and now with quiet invulnerability. For the woman who has survived her own abyss no longer fears absence. She has learned how to feed herself with silence, how to be held by her own presence. She is not unreachable. She simply no longer permits intrusion. There is a vast difference between opening your heart and being torn apart. Yes, she still opens, but only for what is real, only for what comes without performance, without script, without the need to prove. She has learned to recognize the difference between connection and choreography. Her energy is no longer available for the inauthentic. Her transformation isn't superficial. It is archetypal. It is ancient. It is rooted in the knowing that women were never born to be shaped. They were born to overflow. And in reclaiming that truth, she awakened the wild woman within, the one who is intuitive, emotionally sovereign, the one who walks alone, but is anything but lost. She is in communion now, not just with herself, but with something greater. Call it purpose, call it destiny, call it the fierce grace of self-remembrance. No matter how they label her, cold, hard, distant, nothing sticks. Because she no longer lives to fit in. She lives to expand. She no longer chases attention. She radiates presence. She's not waiting to be chosen. She is the one who chooses. That reversal unsettles those who still try to control the feminine. But she is beyond reach for control. She has crossed the threshold, and on the other side, she discovered this. The real relationship begins only after you've loved yourself enough to not need anyone. There is something sacred in the way she moves now. She doesn't seek applause. She doesn't require validation. Her confidence is not loud. It lives in her silence. Jung said, "What you do not face within will become your fate." And she faced it. She chose to meet her shadow and still chose to love. That's why she no longer chases love. She invites it. And when love doesn't come in truth, she simply declines. Not with bitterness, not with drama, but with the grace of someone who has gotten lost enough times to know better. Yes, she still longs for love. She still wants to be seen, held, chosen, but not at the cost of disappearing. She's no longer willing to shrink to fit into molds that can't hold her soul. She offers herself only where there is space for the whole of her. That takes a maturity far deeper than romance. It requires self-awareness. It requires having faced the dark and still choosing to remain open. She is not chasing fairy tales. She is calling in a soul alliance, a connection where no one has to shrink, dim, or disappear, where two people rise side by side, not over one another. And if that is too much for some, so be it. She would rather wait than survive on emotional crumbs. And while some call it arrogance, it is simply self-love, in its purest, most sacred form. We are witnessing the rise of a new archetype, a woman who has walked away from the surface and rooted herself in the depths. A woman who no longer wants to be desired. She wants to be respected. She chose solitude not because she gave up on love, but because she finally understood what real love will never demand: the sacrifice of herself, self-denial. Once she saw it for what it was, everything began to change. She no longer needs to raise her voice to be heard. Her presence speaks long before any words arrive. Wherever she moves, the atmosphere subtly shifts. It's not mysticism. It's resonance. It's the weight of a woman who has endured the most brutal inner battles and returned, not victorious in the way the world understands, but whole. Not because she conquered all her fears, but because she made peace with them. They no longer control her. They walk beside her. Carl Jung would say she didn't find wholeness by eliminating opposites, but by embracing them. She no longer runs from her shadows. She integrates them. She doesn't reject love. She simply refuses to shrink for it. She longs to love deeply, but in a love that doesn't ask her to edit her essence. She is both laughter and silence, both tenderness and storm. And she will not apologize for being the whole spectrum, because now she knows those who only love the light don't understand love at all. And those who fear her bitterness have never tasted the kind that heals. She's too whole to settle for halves, too free to accept prisons dressed as devotion, too finely attuned to endure anything shallow. And yet, she's strong enough to keep walking this path, even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when no one understands. That's the journey of the awakened woman, to trade comfort for truth, to let go of validation in exchange for alignment. The world, deep down, fears women like her, not because she is loud, but because she no longer needs. She no longer bows. She no longer bends to fit into structures that were never built to honor her fullness. She questions. She disrupts. She breaks invisible contracts that once said a woman's worth depended on who stood beside her. And when she rewrites those rules, she lights a path for others. And that is revolutionary. So she continues, sometimes with tears in her eyes, sometimes with her chin held high, but always with both feet grounded in her own becoming. Because now she knows she's not alone. She's with herself. And after everything she's survived, that is more than enough. Any love that comes after this won't arrive as salvation. It will be celebration. It won't come to complete her. It will come to join her. It won't try to fill her. It will overflow with her. When a woman chooses to walk alone, the world rushes to tell her she's making a mistake. But deep within, she feels something sacred aligning. It's not pride, it's not rebellion. It's a rare kind of wisdom, the kind born in silence, the kind Jung called individuation, becoming fully who you are, without masks, without compromise. And when that awakening takes root, nothing outside of her holds more power than the truth pulsing in her chest. That truth doesn't need to shout. It shows itself in the quiet way she closes a door without resentment and never looks back, in the way she steps back when the space no longer feeds her spirit. You can feel it, in the way she smiles, quiet and content, even when there's no hand in hers. You understand. She's discovered that solitude isn't a punishment. It's a promise, a vow of loyalty to her own soul. And the soul of an awakened woman does not beg, does not dim, does not perform. It simply is. And in that being, there is power. The world may keep trying to convince her she's missing something. It will offer distractions, a carousel of plastic princes, love made for display, affection crafted more for appearances than for truth. But she's seen behind the curtain. She knows now it was never about finding someone. It's always been about never losing herself again. And when that realization settles into her bones, everything changes. Desire becomes discernment. Lack becomes choice. Waiting becomes a path. What once hurt becomes teacher. What once bound becomes the very thing that sets her free. There's something stirring inside. Maybe it's a memory, maybe a scar that still holds meaning, or a flicker of a woman you once were, or the woman you're still becoming. Something in you is ready to no longer fit what never truly held you. And if you let it, it will reshape how you love, how you connect, and most importantly, how you see yourself. That woman who lives alone, she isn't lonely, she is whole. She is not rejecting love, she's redefining it. She walks with no need to lead and no desire to follow. Her path is her own, quiet, resolute, inviolate. And along the way, she leaves sparks, little fires lit in the hearts of others who are waking up too. If something in you responded to this story, if something softened, stirred, or rose within, perhaps it's because you too are ready for a love that doesn't demand pieces of you, ready for a love that begins with peace within, a love rooted in presence, in silence, in truth, the kind of love that cannot be negotiated, chased, or disguised. And if it hasn't come yet, maybe it's because you were meant to become the woman who would never again accept less than her full worth. If this message found you at the right time, or woke up a voice you'd nearly forgotten, don't let it pass quietly. Share it, not for attention, but for connection. Not out of impulse, but out of choice. Because when something stirs the soul, the most beautiful thing we can do is let it echo within us and through us.